Keir Starmer has made an absolutely shocking admission today. He has announced that globalisation is over. Now, this will be quite shocking to some of you guys because I know a lot of you in the comments like to call him things like a globalist puppet. He loves to spend his time abroad at conventions with all his bureaucrat mates who absolutely are obsessed with the idea of globalisation. And don't forget that he went viral for this clip here.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, and it's closed, and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
So there we go. Remember that clip of Keir Starmer saying that he prefers Davos, where the WEF are, to Westminster. He prefers undemocratic institutions to the Houses of Parliament. But now it seems like Flip-Flop Starmer is making the ultimate of flip-flops because he is now changing track. Of course, this is after the Trump tariffs have been announced. Not that that is the only factor at play here. I think that that is kind of the nail in the coffin for his view on globalization after we have had various shocks affecting our economy, like, for example, the war in Ukraine causing issues with inflation and whatnot in Britain. So let's take a look at this article that he has written in the Telegraph. He published this just last night. He says, first it was defense and national security, now it is the global economy and trade. Old assumptions can no longer be taken for granted. The world as we knew it was gone. We must rise to meet the moment. So we'll have a look at a little bit more at this, but you can potentially see some hints in this article of maybe some policies that are about to be announced in the future. We've seen changes in his approach to, for example, national security, announcing more money going to defense rather than foreign aid, but potentially we're going to see more of a move in that protectionist direction in the economy as well. We're also going to look at in this article get an idea as to whether Keir Starmer is going to retaliate to Trump's tariffs or not. Let's take a look. So he says, we're ready for what comes next. The new world is less governed by established rules and more by deals and alliances. It demands the best of British virtues, cool heads, pragmatism, and a clear understanding of our national interest. And I want to draw attention to that word pragmatism there. I think Keir Starmer, this is something that he's trying to show that he is capable of and something that he can use as an excuse for cozying up to Donald Trump. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, him cozying up to Donald Trump. I'm glad that he was able to have some, somewhat successful meetings with Donald Trump. There still is potentially the opportunity to get a trade deal with them. But a lot of the leftists who are very ideological are absolutely furious at Keir Starmer for being kind to Donald Trump because, they think he's a rapist, a misogynist, a racist, and all of these things, right? But Keir Starmer, he has to make the argument, I'm being pragmatic. This guy may not be ideologically aligned with us in all ways, but we have to do what's best for the British economy. And I feel like that is the message that he is trying to get across in not just this, but his leadership style generally. So I spoke about how Ukraine has affected our economy as well. Created shocks, just like how the Trump tariffs have done. He's reaffirming here, trying to show that he's done a good job when it comes to talks with Ukraine, bringing people together. So giving us a little bit of a resume for himself, boasting a little bit, but that's not really the most important thing here. What is he saying about tariffs? Will he respond with more tariffs? Will he start a trade war? Well, this is what he has to say. That is why on tariffs, the immediate priority is to keep calm and fight for the best deal. Nobody wins from a trade war. The economic consequences here and across the globe could be profound. We already have a balanced trading relationship with our American allies, and work continues on a new economic prosperity deal. So clearly making a commitment to still try and fight for a deal with Donald Trump, also suggesting he's not going going to have a trade war where he puts up tariffs in retaliation. But also the thing you've got to consider is if Keir Starmer, he's kind of showing his cards, right, by writing this in an article saying, we're not going to engage in a trade war. That kind of says to Donald Trump, oh, there are going to be no consequences for me. There are going to be no consequences for America if I don't go ahead with a free trade deal with Britain. So a little bit unsure about his approach here, but it seems quite clear that he is not aiming to end up in a situation where we have lots of tariffs, super protectionist policy. But it looks like, as we'll see in the article a little bit further, is that he's interested in prioritizing, very similar to approach to Trump, in that he's talking a lot about jobs, for example, okay, making his priority not just getting a big GDP figure that Rachel Reeves can announce, but making sure that there are jobs created in Britain for British people. Okay, interestingly, he mentions immigration and bringing in cheap workers, so that potentially is something that might please some people on the right. So let's take a look at what else he says. He talks about strengthening our alliances and reducing barriers to trade with other economies around the world. So there again, not just talking about having no retaliatory tariffs with the US, but also saying that he is still interested in free trade with other nations. Now, as I said, he's basically announced globalisation is over. So what does this mean? So although he's not interested in putting up a load of tariffs on other nations, he's very interested in investing in the UK and in UK jobs and UK industries to make sure that we can provide for ourselves rather than relying on other people. Comparative advantage was a huge theory in economics that transformed economies. Comparative advantage basically says if another country can make something cheaper than you can make it, you should not make it in your country. You should just import it from abroad, right? And so you should specialize your country, just focus on the, one or a few industries that you have your comparative advantage in, right? Where you can produce the cheapest, right, compared to other people. You can export that elsewhere. Everything else you need to rely on other people for. But that makes you very volatile to outside shocks and what other nations are doing. We're seeing a move away from that aspect of globalization in his approach. So here we have a little bit, he's talking about making Britain a tapestry of thriving economies, maximizing local skills, talents and opportunities, creating wealth in every corner and delivering security for everyone everywhere. National renewal will take the skills and talents of us all. We stand ready to use industrial policy to help shelter British business from the storm. Some people may feel uncomfortable about this. The idea the state should intervene directly to shape the market has often been derided, but we simply cannot cling onto old sentiments when the world is turning this fast. That refusal to accept a changing world is at the heart of Britain's declinism over recent decades. For too long, our major institutions have simply tried to manage crises. The approach has been to muddle through rather than deal with the fundamental cause. It's working people who have been hit the hardest. Nurses, builders, carers, people working harder and harder for fewer pounds in their pockets. People are fed up to the back teeth with insecurity in their lives and their community. In the new era of global instability, people look towards the future with trepidation. And then he says, let's just take a look at what he says about immigration. It is here somewhere. It's on screen somewhere, but basically he says that we need to stop relying on cheap workers from abroad. So maybe we'll see a change to immigration policy. But this is a very interesting change of approach from Keir Starmer. The one thing that I'm definitely a bit worried about here is his argument for state-guided industrialization. Okay, so you can have a focus on building up certain sectors of your economy without it being state-run companies. by this, does he mean GB Energy? Does he mean a nationalised railway system? Like, what exactly is he talking about? What is this going to look like? We've just had Rachel Reeves do her spring statement, which is like an updated budget. Is there going to be another similar event where we see a new set of policies rolled out, another change of track, as a consequence of Trump's tariffs and this decision to move towards securing Britain's economy from instability, from outside shocks, from what other countries are doing? Interesting stuff, and we will be, of course, watching very closely to see if he is able to get a deal with Donald Trump so we can get rid of the tariffs that we have. We got off quite lightly, though, because we have got 10% tariffs versus 20% on the EU. I think that's making Brexiteers feel quite vindicated, to be honest, because we are now seeing that post-Brexit, we're potentially going to end up a more prosperous nation. It's going to be interesting to see how the Labour cabinet responds to that. Do they see, right, we need to embrace Brexit, we need to focus on life outside of the EU, or are they still going to be focused on this reset, EU reset, where they try and get closer with the EU? It'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks and months. Anyway, I'm Chloe Dobbs. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the Reason channel for more videos like this.